This is the only species of lizard and marine iguana that actually can do this in the ocean. There's some research that tells that these guys can go up to 30 meters deep, and they can stay up to 10 minutes. That means they are really well adapted to live in this environment. These marine iguanas show also special adaptations that makes them different to other species of iguanas. One of them is having a very flat tail, which gives them a lot of propulsion, so they can swim and get to deeper areas where they find their algae. I found it really admirable because you can see the currents, how strong, and the tides are really, really strong here in the Galapagos. So sometimes you find them really struggling just going and diving in these kind of very strong currents and then coming back. It's something really amazing. I just found them, they are really strong and resilient animals. Oh. I've noticed that the marine iguanas looks a little not that fat. Actually, they are a little skinny. So don't forget that we are just ending the time of El Nino. And what happens with these guys is that they may not find too much food at this moment. But they have a very interesting adaptation. They actually can shrink. They can reduce their body size up to 20%. So that's a lot. That's a very big percentage in terms of reducing the size. Imagine yourself. I mean, we can get really skinny, but not reducing our size. You're talking about reducing even bones and muscles, everything. They reduce 20% of their size when there is lack of food. So that's an adaptation for them to resist during a very strong El Nino phenomenon. Well, we know that when there is warmer waters, there is less productivity in the water, there is much less algae. And this is natural cycles, so we have seen many of these iguanas that are actually now dead. So if we consider that this is part of the natural cycle, well, we will then have a period of La Niña when the water will become colder. The problem is that we know that now with climate change, there is possibilities that these kind of El Nino events will become stronger. So it's not only now natural cycles, but it's also the influence of humans that are modifying and doing modifications in this kind of weather cycles. So we really need to think how we are relating with the whole environment, and marine iguanas are a good indicator of the health status of the ecosystem. And here in such a well-protected marine reserve, this makes everything clear. We as humans have a big responsibility on protecting these species, and every of our actions will have an effect on their health status.
The only true seagoing iguana in the world, right? When Darwin was here, had a taste of it. They were experimenting with iguanas and yes, discovering. So they tied one iguana to a rock and they threw it there. And they waited 5 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. And after an hour, they pulled out the iguana out of the water and the iguana was still alive. Normally they just do it for half an hour and they're completely herbivores. It is very late for this iguana to be out here in the water. It is already almost 4:30, so the iguana must recharge the battery just before it goes to sleep. And these marine iguanas, they will never dig a burrow like the land one we saw like 2 days ago. They really come into piles of 10, 20, 50, 100 iguanas, one on top of another, and they will use each other so they can sleep and they can protect themselves from the cold wind that comes with the evening.
Today we saw something very impressive that I never seen in 16 years working as a naturalist in the Galápagos National Park. We saw, with our guests, marine iguanas fighting in the water. The most curious thing about this fight is around 20 minutes, and usually the iguanas fight for territory. They fight for land that includes few females. but they were basically fighting for nothing in the water. This never happened at all. This time of year in the Galapagos we are influenced by the warm current coming from the Panama, which bring a lot of warm water, and that influence in the behaviors of the species in the Galapagos, primarily in species such as reptiles. For example, the marine iguanas, they are right now in the mating season. That is why their behavior is changing. They are turning more colorful, but at the same time they're becoming more aggressive.
This morning, our guests landed at Fernandina Island at Point Espinosa. This area, it's a really interesting area, not only because of the incredible geology, but because of the amount of wildlife. Fernandina Island is the island where we find the highest concentrations of marine iguanas, and it's the only seagoing iguana in the planet. This is a really interesting time of the year to observe the marine iguanas because this is mating season, and there is a lot of stress amongst the males because the males have established territories and they're constantly displaying for the territory, and the way they do it is by head nodding.
And there was a hawk just welcoming us to the island. We immediately saw iguanas all over the place. We saw the males, the very large dominant males, doing this, and they were establishing their territory. Well, if you like water and you like animals, it's Valhalla. It's been a trip of a lifetime. This is just heaven on earth because I love to swim and I can't wait to do the snorkel trip.
Last time I was here was a month ago, exactly a month ago. Until a month ago, water temperature was about 72 more or less. And while snorkeling, you could see the rocks just like this. Clean, black, nothing growing on them. But in 3 weeks, the cold water arrived and produced a huge change, which is this, the growth of algae, the growth of ulva. This is the main diet of a marine iguana. Imagine you are a marine iguana and for 35 years of your life you have this for breakfast, brunch, lunch, snacks and dinner. This was a warm year called an El Niño year, so that's why this algae was pretty much gone. There were hundreds of iguanas, I guess thousands of iguanas that died throughout this region. And this was part of the dreams of the iguanas. So until a month ago, they were still dying. And maybe some of those sick iguanas are still dying. We might see some of those skinny ones. But once this comes back, well, this population of iguanas is going to recover. And those baby iguanas that were born in this place are actually foraging on this. This is part of a natural cycle that happens every 7, every 15 years. A lot of the iguanas survive, and then you can see there is so much algae in the place that the iguanas that survive it, well, they forage on this algae and the population comes back. And it looks as healthy and as beautiful as the iguanas we have seen.
Well, you've seen before marine iguanas, and you know how extraordinary creatures they are. It's amazing adaptation to marine life. They have flattened tails to swim, they have long claws to hold to the rocks, and they have special teeth that allow them to cut the algae that is growing very, very close to the rocks. But right now, they're going in the water, yes? because right now is the lowest tide. So the algae is exposed, so they have to dive less time to get to the same food. So they save time and money.
I'm Paul from England and Los Altos. We've seen a lot of marine iguanas and it's been pretty remarkable. There's a lot of iguanas. The way that they all transcend down into the ocean in a big line drawn by the ocean, and the sense that they don't even notice that we're there really. It's been great.
These islands are located 600 miles off South America. That means that everything that nowadays is found in the Galapagos came from a different place. It either came flying, wind, swimming, or floating on rafts of vegetation. Millions of years ago, the ancestor of the marine iguanas now we see used to be found on trees in the Amazon region of South America. Over some time, these iguanas, by just strange coincidences, they were taken by these trees that fell from storms, and it became driftwood. And over millions of years, we're talking about at least 6 millions, the marine iguanas appeared. That means that the iguanas that used to be land had to adapt to the environment in Galapagos where there's no plants on land, and the only food source is found in the water, algae. So they had to develop different features like salt glands, a different coloration in their skin, claws extremely long, and also they have a long flat tail that enabled them to swim to get the algae that they need.
This is my first time visiting the Galapagos. It's amazing. I can't even begin to say the wonders I've already seen during this day alone. I'm here with my mom, and we came here because we wanted to see the one place we felt like in the world that animals are still living in their own natural habitat and not afraid of people. But other than that, it really is an ecosystem that's been able to remain natural.
This is the beginning of the marine iguanas breeding season, and we have seen many males this afternoon that are establishing their territories. They're fighting. Some of them have been headbutting others, so they really are displaying their large size and trying to get their territory so that the females are attracted to them and they can mate with them.
I would say the iguana have a historical method of establishing pecking order without really killing one another. It's dominance for a certain piece of territory that they're more interested in than the previous owner of that territory. And it's probably a lot more sophisticated than we can imagine.
We saw this iguana that had blood in its mouth, and then they've clearly been fighting already, and then this other iguana came up and was clearly challenging it, and this one seemed bigger though and in a better position to win the fight. It's just like an experience I feel like you can't get anywhere else, to be able to interact with animals in that way. Seeing things that you can't see anywhere else has been the most interesting and amazing part of this trip.
Welcome to Fernandina. We are on the youngest islands of the Galapagos. This is a very unique part of the archipelago. What's really interesting about this island is the huge amount of lava that we have around here. More than 85% of this island is covered by black basaltic lava because of the fact that this island is relatively new and is still in formation. really nice thing about this time is that the marine iguanas are laying the eggs. And so as I said before, this is an area where there is plenty of food. So we have them by the thousands around these islands. And at this point, the females are competing for nesting sites. So what is important is to see that, you know, the top property will be on top of this. As you get lower, that will get in contact with water. So you have to fight for good property. So you can see the hare doing the head bobbing. That's saying, don't get on my territory.
First day or two, we saw one or two iguanas and we couldn't wait to take a picture of them. Today, there are hundreds. And so you have to be selective in getting these great shots that are out here.
This is a very interesting area. We are in the westernmost part of the Galápagos, and this is a very young geological formation here in the Galápagos. And this afternoon we'll be walking all along the coast, which is very interesting to see this big pile of marine iguanas. Marine iguanas are so unique for the Galápagos. What makes them so unique? The color. Having this dark color, they're going to absorb heat from the sun. Marine iguanas also have these very long toenails to anchor themselves onto the rocks and eat algae. But probably one of the most interesting adaptations is the salt glands. Marine iguanas, when they get out of the water, they're going to start sneezing those salt crystals. So that is very impressive.
We're on Fernandina Island on the west of the Galapagos, and we're doing an evening walk looking at the wildlife and bird life on the island. My favourite of all is the flightless cormorant, but as well as that we saw a Galapagos hawk, which was stunning as well. You have to actually watch where you're walking, where you're stepping, because there's a creature underneath every footstep.
Welcome to Fernandina Island. Okay, this is Fernandina Island. The site that we're going to experience this morning is called Punta Espinosa. And this island is really interesting because of many things. Number one, it's the youngest most island of the Galapagos. It's only 300,000 years old. Also, it's the most pristine island of the Galapagos. Hardly anything has been introduced to this island, and the wildlife is intact, basically. As well, this is the island where we find the highest concentrations of marine iguanas. This is an interesting time of the year because we passed the mating season and the iguanas are nesting. But now the females walk over here to this sand dune, and this is where they build nests, right here.
Oh, I see
okay?
some holes.
And you see the holes, and you still see some females up there.
Yeah, there's one right
yeah, there's digging. Oh yes, yeah, there's digging in there. See?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's digging in there. So still today, they're still laying eggs, some of these female iguanas. At the peak of the nesting season, there's also tension over here because you come here and there's like 50 female iguanas trying to lay eggs here, and they'll display for territories, and they don't want anybody near them, you know. So there'll be a little bit of tension and a little bit of territorial fights for nesting sites.
It's the most special place I've ever been in. Like, I cannot believe how tame the animals are. They don't have any fear of us. And anywhere you look, like, there's just wildlife everywhere. Well, was on my bucket list. I mean, this is just, it's beyond my imagination, and it is so worth it. I'm so glad we made it.
And you can see their little heads going from one place to the other. Now, they are making the most of something that does not happen all the time. It's the low tide and the sunshine. Marine iguanas feed on algae exclusively. If that food is exposed, like in the low tide, that makes their lives a lot easier. So we can say that they're all very happy, all dispersed, looking for their favorite food, and it's great for us too.
Oh my God! Oh, you did it!
Yeah, watch where you're walking.
Be careful, they're about ready to spit again.
It's very important for people to see a place like Fernandina, which is one of the last most pristine islands in the world. Here you can appreciate how important it is to look after such a fragile environment like this with its wildlife, with its biodiversity. It was just a perfect day today.
Buenas tardes to all of you. Welcome to the baby island of the Galápagos. This is called Fernandina. That's thanks to the King of Spain, the time that America was discovered. This is a very magical place. You're gonna see during this afternoon the beginning of life in the islands, where we're gonna be walking on a place that is a little over 200 years old. There's already a beach that was formed 250 years ago. There's already vegetation, and there's already a large number of marine iguanas. There's about 4,000 marine iguanas every kilometer. So there's a lot of iguanas that depend on this nesting site. A year and a half ago, Galapagos and this island was affected by the El Nino for only 2 months. And when the El Nino came, the population of algae died, and immediately the response of the iguanas was just... And that's only 1,400, 1,500 on this tiny little place that died. Just don't step on them and go slow. You can see that the majority of them are not running away from you, so they have reached their maximum size.
They're cute but scary because they spit, and they're very black. They look like rocks.
We're traveling through the Galapagos, and we made a visit to the island of Fernandina, which is the youngest of the islands. I'm Diane Bihar. I'm traveling on the National Geographic Islander, and I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. When we first came onto the island, we saw a lot of volcanic rock, and when we looked closer, it was dozens and hundreds of iguanas laying on top of each other, crawling on top of each other, laying in the sun to get warm. It was almost more than the eye could take in, and almost more than the mind could digest, because there was so much to see.
We are in the westernmost part of the Galapagos, which is known as Fernandina Island and Isabella Island. This morning we have the opportunity to be walking in one of the largest populations of marine iguanas. We have the opportunity to be walking in one of the largest populations of marine iguanas. It is stunning to see them sunbathing. In order to get food, they have to dive right into the ocean, and the reason you see them sunbathing is because they need to gain body temperature in order to accomplish their own metabolism.
We are in the most beautiful place I've ever seen, in this wonderful beach cove, walking on the lava, watching the sea lions and the iguanas. Oh, it's great. I just love the beach.
Today we're visiting Fernandina Island. The place is called Punta Espinosa. We're working on a very new lava field. This field was formed in 1825, and we know that because of the whalers that were already at that time coming to these waters.
Here comes some rocks.
We will find huge piles of marine iguanas here. This is the largest population we have. You easily confuse them with rocks, and there can be hundreds one over the other. But this is a behavior just to keep the warm. Remember, as reptiles, they lose their heat very fast, so they pile like that to keep warm during the nighttime. Marine iguanas are a great example of adaptations. They are the only marine iguana in the world. They feed on algae. And because of this, of course, they will be affected by every change we have on the water temperatures. So events like El Niño are going to affect them a lot. That's why we have seen so many dead iguanas. During the warm season and during El Niño, when the water gets actually warmer, they will suffer a lot in their population. They cannot find the algae they feed on, and they end up feeding in an algae which is toxic for them.
You have to be very careful on this island because you can step on the wildlife so easy. That's what's so amazing. You can't take a bad photo. There's so much to see.